Welcome to Speak Easy with Love. How is everybody doing? My goodness, it's so great to see everyone on a Thursday instead of a Saturday. Sometimes it's really fun to change things up. And I think I did it again because this time, after a month of speaking with the ladies, I'm bringing the men in and we're going to hear what they have to say about what life feels like through their eyes and allow them to have a moment to speak easy with love. So without further ado, I would like to share the center light with my two dear friends, George and Morgan. I'll give them each a moment to share a little bit about who they are and where they're from, and then we will start another roundtable conversation. George, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us where you're from and what you do in your life and what your life's purpose is.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me this evening. I'm certainly looking forward to the great dialogue that I anticipate us
Yay!
having. My name is George Presley, as mentioned earlier. I live in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and I'm certainly a father of a 3-year-old, and she certainly keeps me on my toes, and she's extremely active and has me wrapped completely around my fingers. So fun times there. Um, I'm privileged and blessed, more or less, to work in healthcare arena, support services. Been doing it now for nearly 15 years. It has had me in, let's see, I have resided in the Atlanta area, Connecticut, and South Florida. So um, just looking forward to this conversation and a good evening with this broadcast. Thank you.
Super. So grateful to come into our inner circle. Thank you so much for that introduction. Morgan, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Well, I'm a divorced father of two biological children, and then stepfather to four other children in a relationship with a beautiful woman. And between the two of us, we've got six, ranging from age 26 years old all the way down to age 15 and everything in between. So as we like to joke, at any given moment, our phone can ring and something can be going on with one of them. So it's always exciting to say the least. Professionally, I've been in advertising and digital advertising specifically for about 10, 15 years. So that's what I do during my day. And, like George said, I'm excited to kind of dive into this conversation and talk about some stuff. So looking forward to it.
Well, thank you so much for braving this conversation with me. I know a lot of men that would run the other way. So I'm grateful that you're here. Um, I'm going to just start off with something feeling straight to the heart. Now, I know that both of you had said that you're fathers and that you have children. And George, you had made a phrase that you are wrapped around her finger. What does that mean?
I may have misspoke. Actually, yeah. Well, maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. She's wrapped around my finger, meaning
Oh, she's
it's
wrapped
hard.
around you. I'm sorry. That's what I
Right,
meant.
right. Yeah, it's hard for me to say no to her. Although there are moments when I do, and I have to, especially on the discipline side. And my wife and I have slightly different approaches to that. I can be much more stern at times, to the point where my wife will look at me and kind of give me those eyes like, please, you're a little too tough. I mean, I guess that's the intensity that I get from my father and brother, etc. But no, she is wrapped around. Every time I go to a store, it's hard for me not to get her something.
Yeah.
And I just admire her, and she has certainly changed my life. I can tell you that. And I'm 38, by the way. I didn't tell my age earlier. I'm 38, married.
And when you share that you have a hard time saying no, would you normally? I mean, would you do you see yourself in the limelight of someone that would have boundaries and structure, but the love that you have as a parent has changed that, or what does that mean?
Great question. I do pride myself on a lot of disciplinary factors in my life points, rather. And, example, if it's 8 o'clock at night and she's about to take a bath and get ready for bed, and she's like, Daddy, can I have a cookie? Sometime I give in. Sometimes, if she's already had a yogurt for the day, and she looks at me, Daddy, can I have another yogurt? And I look around and I'm like, okay, sure, here you go. Sometimes I don't give in, but sometimes I do. Like today, I work from home, and she likes to go grab French fries sometime from McDonald's or Zaxby's, wherever the case may be. And I'll take her and I'll say, hey, we
Smart
can't do
girl.
this. Yeah, we can't do this often, but we do it from time to time. Don't want her to be have a diet consisting of fast food every day. That's not good. But nevertheless, that's what I mean by that. And it's just I do pride myself on being disciplined. I actually was gracious, and the good Lord blessed me. I went to college in North Carolina and played football, and so other things in my life has developed that discipline to be the best that you can be. And I want to instill that in her, but there is a definite soft spot. Trust me.
Yeah, I know my children, they've done that to me too. And I find myself, I almost like to say that when we have children, we get a whole new set of eyes to see from. And it's usually the ability to see life a little bit through their eyes, and therefore it skews a little bit the way that we might perceive or see things too. So I really can resonate with that. Parenting is no joke. It's such a reward, and it's such a blessing. But wow, it really has its ups and downs and teachable moments. And I find that those teachable moments are usually for me. How about you, Morgan? What type of things do you find in parenting that have kind of changed you or seem ironic based on what you were raised with?
Whew, wow, that's a really multi-layered question when you really get down to it. But I mean, I think what George is probably experiencing now, I experienced very early on when when I had my daughter at 25, completely changed my life, right? So went from the typical young 20-year-old with really every thought being about what's in front of my nose and what am I going to do next, to having to completely shift that focus to what does my child need, and what do I need to do for them next. So it's a complete shift in the way you look at things. So it changed me dramatically. And then looking back, kind of ironically, with the experiences that I had as a kid and looking at what they're doing, it's amazing that things that you were okay with as a young person, you're not okay with as an adult, looking at it from the eyes of an adult and a child. So and they consistently throughout my parenting life have shown me a real strong mirror of how I was as a kid, and having those moments and those epiphanies, and having to really look at that has been some really good lessons in life.
What do you think influences you the most as a father? And I guess this is a great question for both of you. Morgan, why don't you start with that? What is your greatest influence in your life today that encourages you to be the father that you are? Whether and you know what, and influence can also be negative. So if there's a challenge as well, speak to that. What is the one thing that inspires you to be great, and what is the one thing that maybe challenges you to have that influence, of what you're speaking to?
Well, I think one of the biggest, probably the biggest influence is just life itself, right? The experience that comes. George, you mentioned you're 38, 150. So after 50 years on this planet, experiencing the things that I've experienced, from the thoughts of a young adolescent to the thoughts of a 50-year-old father, and the life experiences that happened in between, those have been my biggest inspirations, right? So knowing that, every single friend of mine, if I look back, including myself, there's always several forks in the road. And when you go this way down the fork or this way down the fork, you can almost see it now as an adult, with that experience and that life practice, that you didn't have when you were younger, and you can really tell, like, okay, listen, you're at a critical juncture right now, based on my experience and what I've seen in life, that if you don't make the right move right now, and I don't even mean the right move for me, but the right move for you, things can go really sideways in your life. So I think the biggest inspiration for me is just experience and seeing what takes place, when you go down the wrong way or the right way.
And can you share with us perhaps one outstanding experience that holds space within you that really taught you?
Whew. Wow. One particular experience. There's a lot of them, actually. There's a lot of them. I think one of the biggest things is coming to that epiphany in life, and I feel like my daughter's already hit it, and is going in the right direction. I'm still waiting for my 22-year-old son to get smacked across the head, because sometimes that's what it takes for us men to learn a lesson. We got to we got to feel some pain. But just having that moment of clarity of, listen, I got to do something a little more than what I'm doing today, right? So a perfect example in my life was, I was probably 22 years old. I just got back from Utah. It's been a season up there, being a ski bum and working on a ski resort, and was back here in San Diego. And I had I'd gone to high school, and I played around. I say play around. I played around in college a little bit. Went to junior college and pretended to go for a little while, and never completed anything. And I was working a job for minimum wage, and feeling the pain of that, and realizing that's not enough money to pay for everything I want to do and want to achieve. And I was sitting there watching TV and saw a commercial come on for El Dorado, a business school that had all these different degrees. One of them was an accounting degree, and it showed a medium salary associated with each one of these degrees, of which you could achieve, after graduation. And it just clicked, and literally the next day I was on the bus going to that school to tour it and find out, what this is all about. And ended up getting my degree in accounting, and haven't looked back. So
You
I'm not
really
sure if
feel
that's the
like
answer.
getting. No, I think that you shared a lot of great things, understanding where you were in life at different, ages, but especially that age, and knowing that you wanted more. And, that is quite an energy that inspires us when we decide we want more, and then getting into the action of
Yeah.
being. So I can
Yeah.
really appreciate that. In education, was it what you wanted it to be?
Yeah, it was exactly what I wanted it to be. It gave me the confidence to step out of the service roles that I had been in, because it's really, with just in high school education, you're pretty limited on what you can do. You can be a waiter, you can be a waitress, you can do a lot of these service roles. And getting that education, even though I did accounting for, I think, maybe a year and a half, and I've been in sales ever since, it got me into a position where I felt confident in going after roles and going after jobs that before maybe I didn't feel qualified for. So it gave me the
Hmm.
confidence to do that.
George, how about you? Was there anything that really inspired you along your journey and your timeline, that really was a difference maker and a game changer in your life, for both the positive or possibly the negative?
Sure, I can mention a few. I'll go back to my college days. And when I first got to college, I had, really good, strong grades in high school. And as I said, I blessed to play football, went on a full scholarship for football. And I thought, as most collegiate athletes do, that I would be in the NFL one day. And I'll cut to the chase. I did not take my classes as serious as I should have. So I made an F my first semester. I was an AB student, primarily A's in high school. Got to
Hmm.
college first semester, lost my focus. Um, Started smelling myself, thinking I was more than what I was, and truth be told. And so I came home that winter break, and my father didn't have much to say to me. And my mom, I'll never forget, she sat me down in the house I grew up in Middle Georgia, and she was just asking me. So, and my mom was an educator, as well as many ladies in my family, and asked, "Okay, what are your challenges? What's going on? Why are you having these challenges? This isn't like you." And I began to give excuses. I wasn't transparent. My father walked by and heard the conversation and said, "Stop BSing. I know you're better than this." I went back that next semester and I made Dean's List, Chancellor List moving forward. Another defining moment I'll stay in college was into my, I studied business and I was into my major courses, and I was smelling myself big time. This was during football season and I was
It's a
taking this
great
business law
expression.
class. Yes, I really was. I was, getting some accolades here and there, having a really good year on the field, and I failed this test, and I made a 40. I will never forget.
Hmm.
The professor pulled me in her office and said, "You can be a superstar. You can run all the touchdowns you want. You got to do better, and you will do better. And I know you're more capable because I know you're smarter than this."
So someone believed in you.
That's correct. And I looked at her and I said, "Thank you." And she said, "No, don't put your trust in football. You are a smart young man." And that resonated with me because from there I had a different view of the importance of my scholastic career. I
Hmm.
understood why my parents worked hard for me to get an education. From that point on, I really, hunkered down and got my degree and was blessed enough to get a master's degree in the School of Business. And I took it very serious. Sat in the front row, um, became a graduate assistant, etc. So that was a pivotal moment for me. Now, some things that went south when I started my professional career, and I guess I struggled with humility a little bit there because I started again smelling myself when I got to Florida and started hanging out too much, and it was reflective in my performance on the job. And I had to make a decision. Do you want to have fun and party, or do you want to focus in and aspire to reach the goals that you have set for yourself?
And
And
about how old are you at this point?
I was mid 20s, what,
Okay.
25, 26?
Yeah. And
You
those are
put it
big questions. Yeah.
right. You put a 25, 26-year-old in South Florida. I wasn't married then. I had no kids. It was like a kid in a candy store. I'll be honest with you. Being a young man, and I know Morgan and I'm sure certainly can relate. And
I can't wait to
I
find out what that means.
oh boy,
Yeah,
I'll open up for that one, didn't I?
you
So,
did. Good job.
and yes, in all honesty, I had to get a grip on things, and I did, and I relocated to Georgia. That was one of the things that took place, and I did get a better focus on it. But a couple of those experiences really helped me to understand that not to rely on others, and what I mean by that is to understand your purpose and understand what drives you, and truthfully rely on God to strengthen you and guide you and provide that wisdom. When I was in Florida, um, I knew what was right. I chose to do things that I knew I shouldn't have done. A little bit different in college. I was just so wrapped up into playing ball. And then the last defining moment that is good and bad is 6.5 years ago, my father passed away. And that was the second time someone really close to me passed. And I really struggled. I grieved really hard. I couldn't understand, had a lot of questions. And that's, as I tell people, when I really started truly understanding who God was. Grew up the whole my life in church, but until you really have an interaction where you have to rely on Him or go an alternate route, you learn quickly what that's all about. So those four that I spoke on are fresh in mind, and it's like yesterday for all of them. And those were very much pivotal moments that helped me become more so who I am today.
What was it like being a young boy or even a young adult in your relationship with your father, George? How did that relationship affect your life and perhaps influence you as a man?
My father, yeah, I mean, I looked up to him. He's my hero, my mentor. He was my father, right? Is still my father. Oh, he's up in heaven now. And it was, you know, I watched how my father denied himself and gave for others. I watched how he was a provider for my home, and I didn't even know really what that meant then. I watched him wake up and go to work day after day and set an example.
Mhm.
My father made his own rules. My brother and I played sports, and there was the expectation that grades you had to make to be eligible to play. He had his different. You made a C, you weren't going to play, and
Mm,
that's why I said I was an AB student. I had to be to play.
right.
You wasn't going to miss church. You was going to wear suit, tie. I mean, my father was he wasn't military, but you would think he was militant if you met him. Very stern man. I wasn't allowed to go out and party and hang out after games or whatever. I did go to the prom. I did do a few celebrations, a few parties when I was a senior in high school. But aside from that, I was the kid that was up Saturday mornings in the gym. And my dad didn't have to tell me to do that. I chose that because I had that drive, I had that passion because I know I wanted to go to college and play collegiate football and get a good education. So watching my father be diligent, and when he would speak, people would listen. Um, he mentored young men, and there were times I would see him go purchase toys for them, and I would say, well, Dad, I want some toys, and he would say, they're in much more need than you are. They're undeserving, and I didn't quite understand it. All I saw was my dad spending money for another kids and not me. The
Right.
selfish side. I was a kid, right? So to sum all that up, he was not very. My father wasn't the most compassionate. He wouldn't tell you, "Hey, I love you. I'm proud of you, son. You're doing a great job." One of the first times I heard my father say, "I'm proud of you," was when I got my MBA, and he shook my hand and he said it, but he said it in a tone where, "What's next?" And that's how my mind is now. And he did that, and I'm so thankful for that because in his latter part of his life, when he was really ill before he died, he told me he loved me multiple times a day. I saw him apologize to people. My father was very proud. He was a stern man. I saw the change in him just before he passed away. And, again, that embarked on me and said, that George, you need to learn from this and see how to treat people while you're on this earth. So
Mm.
my father
Say that
was,
one more time. Say that one more time.
so all that being said, it embarked upon me and impressed upon me the importance of how to treat people. Don't ever
Mhm.
let yourself get too high. Don't ever let yourself get too low.
Mhm.
He taught me that to remain humble. And he would say, you don't have to do everything like I do it. I want you to be better than me. And he set
Yeah.
examples. And I kid you not, till this day, I had a work meeting in South Carolina, and my mom was there with me. And I normally, it's embedded in me. I wear a suit to work most days with a tie. And I yanked the tie off. I said, I'm not wearing a tie today. And my mom looked at me and said, what would your dad say? With a
Mm.
straight face. So I said, all right. I grabbed the tie and put it on, and that's just the nature of it. So it's instilled in me. And I can't thank him enough. When I was younger, I didn't understand why I couldn't go hang out with kids. Like, why? And it wasn't that I was pent up in the house and he was that strict to where I didn't have a social life. That was furthest from it. But he had enough discernment, and he would tell me, you would understand one day, son, why I'm not allowing you to do these things. So all that being said, he was an amazing father.
Very nice. Thank you. That was a beautiful share. And it really shows us how you were raised and what kind of upbringing you had. It gave us all a really nice screenshot of that. Thank you. Morgan, how about you? How did your father influence your life?
Okay, that's a tricky question with me. So my biological father wasn't part of my life at all. So I had a single mother until I was about 9 years old. Now she had one particular boyfriend that had an influence on me when I was younger. And then I had a stepfather from 9 years old until I think they got divorced when I was about 24, 25. So I
Mhm.
would say he was the one that influenced me the most, um, in a couple, great ways, and then some, probably some really bad ways. And so, I take a lot of the goodness that he provided, and then the bad stuff that I saw, I use that as a tool of don't ever do that, right? So I kind of used both his good and bad for the betterment of myself. He was in construction, and he took me under his wing several times. One of the best lessons he ever taught me was I wanted, my mom had gotten me a bike for Christmas, and it wasn't the bike that I wanted. I'm like, I'd say it should have these tires and this frame and this and that. I was ridiculously upset at a gift, that I should have been happy about. And so he pulled me off to the side and said, listen, you want the bike that you want? I said, yeah, absolutely. He's like, okay, cool. Be ready to get up at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. You're coming to work with me. You're going to work for it. I said, oh, all right, cool. So that entire summer, I helped him build some apartments that my family ended up owning up in Oceanside, and it was the best summer of my life. I mean, it was, I learned tile work, I learned framing, I learned a lot of skills that I still use around my own house today, and I earned the money. And then it got even better. I didn't actually go buy a bike. I bought a frame. I bought all the parts that I wanted. And another great man in my life, my uncle Don, who's my mom's brother, helped me build it, helped me paint it, helped me put it all together. And so at the end of the day, riding around the neighborhood on a bike that I not only paid for, but I customized and I built myself was one of the best experiences that I could have possibly had between two good men that were in my life.
Right.
Now my stepfather taught me some other things that weren't so good. He was, for all intents and purposes, he was an alcoholic. He drank too much, and I got to experience that. Seeing that, there was times in my life where, witnessing what adults were doing around me, and recognizing as a young child that that's something that doesn't seem right. That's not good. That doesn't seem good. And even to this day, I don't drink much, occasionally once or twice a month, maybe. But, I grew up with wine in the fridge, beer in the fridge at all times. You go to my fridge right now, there's no wine, there's no beer. I just, that daily consumption of alcohol was something that I saw as a young child that had some negative effects on my family. And even as an adult, it's playing out, once again in my life, watching my mother, who's currently 72, struggling with that substance still. And so it's one of those blessings that occurs. I got a real education on some really good, um, let's say, things that you can do as a man. Taking care of the family, getting up, working every day, using your hands, building things, that type of stuff. But that I also got on the other flip side of what not to do as a man. Consuming too much alcohol and doing the things that result from that were a painful lesson back then, but a very powerful lesson now, later in life.
Yeah, I can hear that. Thank you so much. That really gave us, again, another screenshot of you and how you were raised. And the one thing I heard from both of you was a little bit about your mamas. So I can't help but ask, I'm a mama bear myself. And, what was it like being a mama's boy? What was it like being, raised by a woman, and what did that feel like? Was she affectionate? Was she talkative? Was she to herself? Was she under the rule of your father? Was she her own mind? What kind of woman raised you? Did she work? Did she stay home? Give us an idea of what it felt like to be raised by your mama bear. George, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Sure, thank you. My mom was a school teacher, extremely loving, and I mean that sincerely. Wanted the best for us. She was certainly in my corner in all my endeavors in life, even to this day. She resides with my wife, and now she helps us for childcare with my daughter. We pulled my daughter out of daycare when the pandemic started. So she's here. And when I lived in Connecticut, she moved up to assist us with childcare there as well. So I give those examples to say the loving part. You know, she certainly, like my father, denied herself and put others before her. She has a humongous heart. My mother also is very transparent. If it's on her mind, she's going to say it, even if it embarrasses you, even if it humiliated you. And she would say, well, don't do it if you don't want me to say it. That's how my mom was. When I dated, ladies, girls, I'll say ladies in high school, if they were around, it wasn't a ton. If they were around, my mom literally would tell them, are you sure you want to spend time with my son? In a way of saying, you sure you want that guy? And she still is a jokester to this day, but the level of, she pours into you what she knows. And she doesn't deviate from it. Till this day, she tells me the same thing that she told me when I was a kid. And that is, be the best you can be and know who's around you, know your audience. First and foremost, I should say she's like, trust God, you got to pray about things. And she views it as a realist. It's hard to pull wool over my mom's eye. And that helped me when I speak to people. That helps me to this day in being candor with people. I can sniff out, if you will, when someone is, not being genuine, and I'll leave that there. Because I grasped that from her. She may not say anything, but after the fact, let's say if we're amongst people,
to let you know.
Right. I don't know about that guy. I don't know about that lady. And every time she's right. Every single time she's right. I can't think of a time when she wasn't. It may not manifest immediately.
Mama's
but
instinct.
eventually, Mama's intuition. Mama's instinct.
Yeah.
So, she's amazing, just like of course my father was. But it was good. Really good upbringing with my mom. She was tough on. She raised two sons and a daughter. I'm the youngest, and busy household. We were popular kids, and now looking back, I asked, how did she do it, raising two sons around the same age level? And very interesting, but very strong lady.
What is the one thumbprint that your mama left on your heart that you carry over in the things that you do in your day, and perhaps how you love on your little girl and even your wife?
Twofold, right? It's denying yourself. Like, she's big on that. Like, don't be selfish and trust God. That is since day one, as far back as I can remember. That would be it for my mom. Like, trust God and don't be selfish. Like, no, get up, do it. I know you don't feel like it, but do it. Help that person. And that has enabled me to have the mindset to where I truly want to bless others. I want to help others. And when you do that, sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes you're going to be asked to do things you really don't want to do. And she will say till this day, help them. There's a reason for it. They wouldn't ask if it wasn't there. And, and if they're not sincere, they're not genuine, don't worry about it. That's not for you to figure out.
That's not your lane. Yeah. Just do what you're called to do. I believe in that too. I was raised very much that way. And, I believe that it's a seed that's planted in you from a very young age. I think it's those character traits and those attributes that we teach just by simply teaching our children to say please and thank you.
Mm-hmm.
and to ask politely for things, and to be aware of their manners, and how other feelings of other people's are, and as I've, you know, goodness, I'm not a young adult, that's for sure, but in my adult life, and I've realized, and I see the goodness in many, most, if not all, even maybe when I shouldn't, but it comes with a realization that not everyone was raised that way, and that you can't necessarily be upset with them if they aren't, because they're only applying or behaving or being who and how they were raised, and that's not any of my business. The only thing I have to answer to is myself and God. And I'm a mom of four, and I'd like to say that those four children are the greatest influences in my life, and they really inspire me. And goodness, I've never shown up for anyone or anything like I do for my children. And I learned that from my mom. She did her very best with the tools that she had, but she had a heart of gold. And I think mamas have a way of implementing that golden heart in their children relentlessly. So yeah, I can really appreciate that. Morgan, how about you? What kind of mama bear energy was influencing you in your life, and what kind of infectious energy did she spill into your life?
Huh. Wow. So my mom was she was a beautician. She owned a beauty salon with her mother, actually, for my entire childhood until I was about 25.
Okay.
So I saw work ethic. She got up every day. She went to work. She provided. Before my stepfather came along, she was the only provider. We had a stable home from age one until we ended up selling it when I was 28 after she moved away with her second husband. So she provided me some really good stability when it comes to things like that as a child. She enrolled me in sports, although she never. I could probably count on one hand how many games she actually went to. But she enrolled me. She always got me set up, and there was always a coach. There was always a male figure that was a coach. That was always kind of there, and everything was pretty close by, so I was able to get myself to and from practice, which is interesting because as a father, instead of just signing my kids up, I decided I would be coach for everything, right? So I coached my son for 5 years in baseball, coached my son for 5 years in football, and kind of went the opposite direction that my mom went. But as far as her being a mama bear, she absolutely showed me massive love. But she also showed me a propensity to not address things that should be addressed and sweep things under the carpet until they blow up into a massive situation. She was, we'll deal with it tomorrow. And even to this day, she'll drop a little something on me that probably should be talked about right now. And she'll drop it, and then she'll say, well, we'll talk about it tomorrow. And then when I want to bring it up tomorrow, we'll just talk about it tomorrow. So she wants to keep kicking the can down the road. And, my mom lost her mother when she was 13 years old. My mom got moved around a little bit between living with her father and living with her uncle. And, she has some things that popped up in her life that give me a little perspective, on where she's coming from. But I can definitely see those things, especially as an adult, looking at her now, how those things really affected her. But I got to say, as a kid, I always felt like I had a safe home to come to. There was always plenty of food. I was provided for. But, I lived with two alcoholics. My mom being a beautician, they started drinking wine at 2:00 in the afternoon every day at the beauty salon. It was just how it was. So by the time she got home, she always had a good buzz going, and it was eat dinner, and then her and my dad would go back to the bedroom and watch TV till they went to sleep, and I'd sit out in the front room and watch TV by myself and do my homework or not do my homework. Really, nobody ever checked on me about my school. Nobody ever pushed me to go to college. There was never any. I think one of the things that I probably missed the most because I gained this by myself, finding my own way to God. We didn't really talk about God in my household. She wasn't an atheist, but we just didn't talk about it. We didn't go to church. Um, I would say that we were, I know she grew up Christian. I knew she grew up going to church, but for some reason, maybe she got a bad taste in her mouth from doing that as a child. She didn't instill that in me at all. I ended up finding my way there all on my own, through some things that happened to me in life. And, it's like you said, George, earlier, like, you're either going to turn this way or you're going to turn that way. And sometimes some situations in life really bring you to your knees, and you've got to reach out to something bigger than you.
Mhm.
And so, my mom divorced my stepfather when I was 24, remarried her new husband when I was 25, right at the same time that I had my first child, and moved from my hometown of Encinitas up to Sacramento. And I resented the shit out of her for it. Oops, I'm not allowed to cuss, but I resented her. I resented her for doing that. Right? I'm like, geez, I just had a kid, and now you're leaving. Like, you're not gonna help out. You're not gonna be here. I was upset for a while, but now looking back on that, could have been one of the best things that ever happened, right? Because then it was like, okay, I don't have that backup. I don't have that. It's this. I got to really step up now, and make sure that I'm there for my daughter. And she ended up getting into a relationship. Now she was married to my stepfather so from 9 until 24, and then she was married for another 22 years to her next husband. Pretty much the exact same guy as my stepfather. Construction, drinker, almost the exact same relationship. She attracted again. And I think it's, kind of goes back to some of the trauma and turmoil that she had as a kid. She never worked on herself. She never fixed any of that. She never went through, fixing some of the trauma that she had as a kid. And so she continued to repeat and do the same things over and over again. So like I had mixed emotions about it. So it was like my stepfather, I saw some really good stuff and received some massive love from her, and she took really good care of me. One thing that I didn't mention in the beginning, one of the significant points in my life is that at age 15, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, so cancer of the lymph nodes. Going through that with my mom and watching her take on all the opinions of everybody around her on what she should do in order to fix my situation, and her having
That must have been hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And having her, watching her navigate that as an adult, take me every day for my treatments. We bonded a lot during that experience. And she was definitely there for me in a really, really big way in a time in my life where I really needed her. So I will always respect her for that, and always love her for that. But when I look back, there was a lot of just go figure this out, and not a lot of really strong guidance on what to do and what not to do. So, much like many young men with that type of, or that lack of guidance, I slam my head against the wall a lot of times to learn the lessons that I've learned, so it's,
So what was it like, as both of you mentioned at some point, and this is kind of circling back, when you were stepping into becoming a young man. I always say there's a moment of becoming a young man and then the young man and then the man, right? Part of your life. So in those moments when you were in your, late teens, early 20s, for each of you, it sounds like you had some experience in college and some fun figuring it out. What was leaving your home life and now you're on your own, right? That moment in time where you get to not be under the thumb of your parent saying, do this, do that. And you have this whole audience, and it sounds like each of you had your share of friends and now female friends, and it's a whole new world, right? What was it about that time in your life that molded you the most? What was it that you were sort of receiving from what your upbringing had taught you, and then using in those first steps in becoming that man? How did that parlay, and what did that translate? George, why don't you go ahead and start? I think we should start when you were in Florida. And
I was assuming you would say that. That's a good
and as
starting
most
point.
men know, ...
Right. So in Florida, when I left graduate studies and took my first job there, my first career, big boy job, if you will, I went back and thought about how my parents were, and how my father got up every day and my mom got up every day, and the resilience that they showed me, and I did just that. I was persistent, and I persevered through some challenging times in an early career. I walked into a situation that was not desirable for many. I'll say it in this way: in that management team where I started, I was there about 3.5, close to 4 years. I'm sorry, 3.5 years to be exact. I was the only member of management to last that long until things changed, to where I was given the opportunity to go somewhere else, or I could have stayed, but and I was actually asked to stay. So I had the will, I had the drive, that I saw my parents do. There was no giving in. Trust me, I called my mother a time or two, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I knew better to call my dad, but I called my mom, and
What did your dad say?
yeah, I wouldn't tell him that, but my mom said, yeah, I wasn't gonna call and tell my father. No, that wasn't happening. So I told my mom, and I remember I was sitting in the front lobby of the hospital, and I called her, and she said, "If you quit now, you'll quit in life, period." I thought that I would get a loving response. It's okay. Come home. Do what you need to do. She had a very stern voice when she said it, and I can still hear it to this day. Um, and simultaneously, I was partying quite a bit. I knew I wouldn't get away from mentioning the fun that came with this. I was, focused at work. However, I could have been more focused because I was having Morgan, as you were mentioning earlier, every Friday night. I was having fun. I was, you mentioned, your mom at the beauty shop. Every Friday, I was feeling good, if you will. And I remember one Friday where I didn't drink, and it felt odd. And that's when I realized, hey man, I'm partying a little too much. Dating this lady, dating that lady. Um, Chasing, as I said, I was a young man, going to Miami. I lived in West Palm. I would go to Fort Lauderdale. I'll never forget, I actually dated two different sisters, and they knew about it. And true story. And, but I say that because I knew that it wasn't in my best interest. I knew that that lifestyle was not sustainable, and I should not have been doing it. And I look back, and you can easily beat yourself up and say, "Oh wow, how dumb was I?" But instead, I look back, and I'm thankful for it because it thrusted me into a position to await my lovely wife, who I'm married to now. And I remember when I first started dating her. I have to say this piece. I'm deviating just a little bit from the question, but I'm sorry, but I think
That's perfect. Go with
I think
the
it's going to
pivot.
tie
Okay.
in, right? I remember sitting on her in her condo, and talking to her, and literally telling her how I was when I was in Florida, and even when I first moved back to Atlanta. And I said, I want you to know the man I was and the man I aspired to be. And clearly I was genuine, because she wouldn't have married me if she didn't feel that. And again, I got that from my mom. Just be honest with people. Even if it hurts you, be genuine with them. So, you know, living that South Florida life, it was fun as can be. Um, but I'm so glad I got it out of my system. And when I went back with my wife when we were dating, I remember going back and it just felt different. I've gone back a time or two and I, of course, partied, had fun. But when I went back with her, I said, I'm glad I don't live here anymore. I'm glad I'm not living that lifestyle anymore. And, you know, we're actually going down to Orlando in a few weeks. I'm actually going to take a week off work. I haven't done that in literally 3 years.
Wow.
2 years.
Good
Yeah,
for
two
you.
years. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
good
I
for
need it
you.
so bad. And it's different. She even teased me sometime. Oh, we're going to South Florida, George, going back to your stomping ground. I'm like, well, not so much. But you know, it really, I I benefit from my past because I know what not to do. I know how to instruct young men, and I can go places and see young men, and I can say to myself, that was me 10 years ago. That was me 15
Yep.
years ago,
Yep.
and I pour into them. I don't chastise them. I don't speak down to them. I just tell them, I know where you're at. Enjoy yourself. Be smart and make as best decisions as you can, if that makes any sense. And
Yep.
they will instantly know what I'm talking about. And Morgan can nod his head because we're man. We know that. And so because that
Let
happened
me
to
just
me,
say this really quick. Will you say that to your daughter?
absolutely,
Yeah.
She's a girl. She can do that.
Absolutely.
That's how girls are.
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
it will be okay if she's having fun dating a bunch of girls and doing a
Well,
bunch of
well,
that stuff
well,
and
well.
having fun.
Maybe not
Well,
dating a
well,
whole lot
what,
now.
George? Well,
Maybe,
what?
maybe not dating a whole lot now. And here's the thing. And I
How
talk
about
about
as
this with my
many as you were? How about as many as you?
probably not. I wouldn't encourage that. I would. However, I see your point, and I don't want to limit her because I do want her to live her life. I'm going to be a little more protective. Now, I don't have a son, and I have nephews, and I say it to them: have fun, but please protect and be smart about things. So I'm going to tell her the same thing, but in all honesty, it's probably going to be a little more stern voice than I do with my nephews, and I know that is
What? But okay, but
contradicting.
why? So if you know that's contradicting, why do we do it? Because we're in a place in our life where we're trying to break cycles of and transform and create equality and create the freedoms for men and women
Right.
to experience who they are and to become equally. How do we do that if we don't change the conversation?
And I'm sorry, I'm getting a better light here. And you know, I certainly agree with you, and I've had these very similar conversations with my wife, as I mentioned before. And I do need to take a deeper dive and not do the stereotype of okay, it's okay for the guy to have fun and party, and but my daughter has to only date a certain guy. I have to meet him. You know, I don't want to put her in that box, if you will. I
Mm-hmm.
do need to think through that. I do need to work on that because I have nieces that literally I'll ask every so often, a little boy is chasing you. And I'm joking yet serious. and
Yep.
but to your point, yes.
I feel it too. I feel that whole cultural influence too. It's it's prevalent more so these days than it was for our parents, that's for sure. And so,
Yes.
if we're thinking about these things, we're going to do things just a little different and
Right.
it's going to create a shift. And that's hopefully going to be a positive thing. So I know I'm giving you a hard time, but for great reason, because these are the kinds of awarenesses that, we face in, being different, being man and woman and, raising children and how we're doing that and knowing that we come off the cusp and the influence of how we were raised, right? So,
Mhm.
Morgan, jump in. How was those early years of your manhood and stepping into being a young man? How did that sort of impact you? And when you were stepping into some of those roles, because it sounds like you were a young dad, and in doing that, how did your parents influence the way that you parented, and going even further to say how maybe you parent your son versus your daughter?
Okay. Well, a couple things. One of the interesting things and pivotal moments, and George even kind of mentioned this in his story, was when I came back from Utah. Just spending
I love
that
that you both have those moments in life. It was Florida for George and Utah for moment. That's good. Those are moments, right? Those are aha moments.
Yeah. Well, what was great about it was, and this is why I keep encouraging my son to do something like this. Like, get away. I don't care what you do. Just get a plan, get a buddy, and go. Right? Because the perspective you gain from living somewhere else and then being able to come back to where you're at with a different lens is
I agree.
huge. I remember coming back from Utah and re-engaging with my friend group, going, these idiots are doing the exact same fucking thing they were doing when I left. Like, this is not good. Nobody's progressing here. I feel like like there's no progress. But the ones that did progress have moved away. Right. So that was a big epiphany moment for me. I really shrunk my friend group at that very, very moment. And it was shortly thereafter that I found El Dorado, went to school, and really kind of got my life, going in the right direction. And I think George will appreciate this as well. Is I remember one specific, so talking about our sons and our daughters, and I've always kind of prided myself on keeping it really real with my daughter and letting her know from a male perspective what is potentially going on in the minds of the young men that she's surrounding herself with. And, I remember one time in my truck, I had her and I think 3 of her friends in the car. And I think it was right around 6th, 7th grade, right? From that transition from elementary school to junior high school. And they were talking about boys, and we just, kind of driving and just over, listening to the conversation. And I remember stepping in and letting them all know, and I, probably should have checked with their parents before I said what I said, but, letting them all know, like, I'm going to give you a little insight on young men at the age that you're at. They are going to start, if they haven't already, have this massive flow of this thing that we call testosterone in their bodies. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that they are evil little liars, but they are going to say whatever they feel like they've got to say to satisfy this overwhelming desire and urge inside of them to hook up with. I don't need to go any further than that, but you know what I mean by hook up with you. Mm-hmm. So just understand that little Stevie, who is your best buddy in 3rd grade, might be thinking a little differently about you today because of this thing they've got going in your body called testosterone. So I just want you girls to understand and just keep that perspective, right? That if they say they love you, they may not actually love you. They might just be wanting something from you.
Yeah.
Right. So be careful, be diligent. I had those type of conversations with my daughter very, very early on. And I can say to this day, she's had boyfriends, but she has, she's never been one to I guess to sleep around, which is, as a father, we're always trying to keep them off the pole, right? So that's the whole. That's a kind of a joke between men, but I mean that's. Mm-hmm. If you've accomplished that, you've been a good father. So my daughter doesn't.
Let me just interject on that one. I can't help myself. Okay. So raise your hand if we look at strippers as exploitation to women. Raise your hand if you realize that stripping and the pole is a form of human trafficking. Yeah, it is. And it's so normalized that we can make comments like that and think it's okay. And I'm not trying to pick on you, but as an advocate for women and domestic violence and human trafficking and child abuse, some of the roots that we plant in genders are just like that, right? And what we don't realize is those places wouldn't be what they are if men didn't go to them. So on one hand, you're saying don't be like that while you're walking in and going. And not necessarily you, but men as a population, as a general statement. And so we don't want girls to be that way, but yet men are really supportive and really excited to go be around the girls that are. Right? So how do we as men change the way that we respect and honor children and young women so that they can feel that shift from the start? What would y'all say to that?
I would say that I mean the conversation's got to start really early on. It's one of those things where being a man and having a daughter really changes your perspective on a lot of that. Especially when your daughter becomes of the age that is appropriate for that. So it starts. I don't know. I can't speak for all men, but I can tell you right now that there's nothing about those places that has ever really turned me on or got me excited. I think they're, I mean, honestly, I think I've been maybe twice in my entire life, and it was never a fun experience, and I never wanted to go back. First of all, I don't like it when I give my money away. I don't like that, and you know what I mean. It's just you can almost
But when you went there, when you went into that environment, did you walk in and go, wow, I'm exploiting women? Wow, these are people paying for this exploitation. Wow, this is a form of sex trafficking. Did you walk in and feel that way at all? No, most men walk in going, oh my God, boobies, and they think that they have a front row seat to have this amazing experience, when we don't realize that the more that we feed that, the more that it grows.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Totally.
How do you feel about that, George?
No, certainly. I can relate. I went quite a bit when I was in Florida. I'm sure you all figured. I don't like them this day. I literally don't like strip clubs. There was a time, because I guess I went so much in Florida, but it would have to be a very special occasion for me to go, like perhaps a bachelor party or guys in town. And even then, I'll say, can we go somewhere else? Because I went so much. And it needs to be an even playing field for my daughter. That's from her getting the job of her dreams and not to be overlooked because she is a lady. That's why we named her Riley, and I agree with my wife 100%.
I have a child named Riley too.
Yeah, she's Riley, yeah. And because a guy can be called unisex, right? A guy can be.
My son is named Riley.
There you go. See, that's why we did that. They see Riley Presley on her CV, her resume.
My son's name is Riley Preston.
Wow. And that's
that's God right there.
That certainly is. So
that's what I call it, godly.
That is, yeah, it is definitely an even playing field. And I have to practice what I preach. If I don't want her living that lifestyle, then to your point, I don't need to be doing that, nor do I need to be around people who indulge in that. So you're right. I agree with you.
But you had said something so, and excuse the expression, stereotypical. You had said if there was a bachelor party or a reason, because that's become a norm. That's the way we celebrate. Now, let's think about that. Why on earth, if someone is getting married and they're in love and they're ready to take a vow with someone, why on earth would the last night before they do that, would they go watch naked women?
And you're 100% right. My buddies.
Why would we do that?
Right. And it doesn't make sense. I'm going to a wedding tomorrow in Charlotte, and one of my closest buddies I went to college with, actually my roommate, is getting married. And 2 weeks ago, a group of guys went out to Scottsdale, Arizona. And that's one of the reasons I didn't go, because I know the activities that's going to be taking place. And, so I say that, and I don't know if you caught this part. I'm the guy that said, hey, can we go somewhere else? Can we perhaps not go to a gentleman's club? And again, I get it. I know the excitement there, but to Morgan's point, at this point in my life, it does nothing for me. If I'm just going to go throw money away, I'd rather give it to my wife or put it charitable or spend it invested something smarter than just literally giving it away, literally. So and it's not just going to a gentleman's club. It's surrounding yourself where there is the temptation, or putting yourself in an environment where perhaps you shouldn't be if you're wanting to lead by example for a young boy or daughter, a young son or daughter rather.
Well, and hold on. Let me just give you a visual. Both of you guys close your eyes. Okay. So I want you to imagine the woman you love in addition to your daughter. So imagine the two of them sitting side by side, and in walks a handsome, stealthy fireman. And he walks up, and there's two of them, walks up and sits right down on their laps with his legs straddled on them. And their sacred spaces are touching, and they can smell each other, and his face is right up against theirs, his chest is against hers, and they could feel each other's breath while the music plays. Go ahead, open your eyes. How'd that feel? Do you like imagining your daughter doing that? Did you like imagining your wife experiencing that? Oh, and I forgot, he took all his clothes off and he had a little teeny tiny string lifting up his booty. That was it. Can you imagine your daughter, your adorable daughters? Can you imagine that? And she's putting money in that little tiny little string.
Mm-mm.
No. And that is just as wrong as when women do it. And so what I'm saying to you is the men of our world need to realize that that is as abnormal as what you just both envisioned and experienced. You wouldn't want that, not only because it became personal because that was someone you loved, but even if it wasn't someone you loved, think about the indecency of strangers touching on strangers that way. That's an organization that has been exploiting people for years, and it progresses to pornography, it progresses to prostitution, and it is the number one instigator and influence to disease, to rape, and many think of an umbrella of energies that fall under domestic violence and abuse. And because we have all these built ups of energies and these unsatisfied norms that take place with that stereotype, men treat women differently and women treat men differently, right? We have these assumptions and these divisions and these divides that make things sociably acceptable. And before you know it, let's just say you're married, right? You fast forward, you're not in Florida anymore, you're married now, and your wife said to you, Mary's getting married and we're going to the strip club tonight, honey. I'll see you in the morning. So, George, how are you going to handle that one?
honestly,
Are you going to give her a bunch of singles?
Honestly, this happened, and I would, my wife don't like going either, but I would tell her, if you think that's best, go ahead. But I need you to, call me when you get there and call me when you leave. I'll say have fun, but not really. But call me when you get there, call me when you leave. And and that's what I said before. I mean, I know she doesn't really care for that.
I'm picking with you, and I'm saying this my honest out of all seriousness. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that would be my honest response. I would, if she really wanted to go, I would say, if that's what you really want to do, go ahead. But
would you feel that was honoring your relationship with each other?
No, not at all. Not at all. Nor would it be if I went. No.
Once upon a time when I was married, I was having a debate with my husband at the time about this topic. And he had said, oh, honey, don't take it so seriously. When the boys turn 18, because I have 2 boys and 2 girls. When the boys turn 18, I'm going to take them to their first strip club, and you're not even going to care by that time. And I said, you're going to do this. You're going to teach that to your sons. Yeah, it's a rite of passage. It's what men do. And I remember how much that that stuck with me. It's probably why one of the reasons why I feel so passionate about learning about these topics in human development is because a lot of times people do just what's been done, but not necessarily because it feels right to them.
Right.
They abandon what feels right to them. And we all know that when we abandon ourselves, we're abandoning God. We're not in that alignment, right? Because we're in fear of maybe, controlling or hurting someone or losing someone. We're in fear of going against the norm. But in all reality, the more that we take steps forward, especially as parents, in creating these shifts and changing these conversations and being that person that says, hey, let's go somewhere else. Maybe let's go for a nice dinner and go play golf, or maybe let's go for, get some massages. And, there's tons of different things that we can do to bond when someone's getting married for the love of God, right? No pun intended. But that's a perfect example of stereotype, of what people just do because that's what's been done. Yeah. And, the one thing that we've talked about a lot today is learning, what we saw from our parents, and then transferring how that transferred over into our lives and parlayed maybe into how we parented or how we didn't parent, and how those first steps of being a young woman for myself and a young man for you, and how that sort of transformed when we had a moment to kind of be on our own and out, out from underneath the thumb of our parents. And by the way, you want to learn a fun fact? Do you know what the rule of thumb means? No? And, being under someone's thumb? I just learned this. It's, I believe it's from the 1200, literally. And back in that day, women were property of their husbands. And if they got out of line or they did anything, there was a rule of thumb. And they were allowed to beat them with a stick as long as it wasn't bigger than their thumb. Hence the expression rule of thumb. Look it up. It's a good one. And so when we hear that expression under someone's thumb or rule of thumb, it really means that someone has control over you. What is your rule of thumb? What is your boundary, your space? But it stems back to years ago of how women were treated and how they were property of their husbands.
We know what I find interesting too is the historical, at least history that seems to come down from the last couple of generations of what you're supposed to do at a bachelor party or a bachelorette party. I mean, how many marriages got off to a horrible start because of what happened at the bachelor party or what happened at the bachelorette party? I mean, that's just,
I've never understood that.
Yeah, I never understood. I mean, Hollywood makes movies about it to glorify it, right? I mean, so it's one of those things where, not to get too deep into philosophy on how we're, brainwashed by media and Hollywood and even the.
But this is very true. We do see persona of what men look like and what men do and how men act versus women. Media is a really big influence on our genders. I mean, hugely, and I will be, very transparent. I remember when I was a young girl, newly married, my husband at the time was going to, he had, clients in from out of town. And so on a Friday, he was taking his clients in from out of town to lunch, and they were going to a strip bar. And I remember being the good wife and laying out his blazer and ironing his pants and getting him dressed to go do this. And everything about me was like, this doesn't feel good. But I was so afraid to step outside of that norm because that's what men did, that I didn't. I kept in line. Yeah. And so, it takes a great force of nature to change the way that we are being, simply by talking about things just like this and having, the discomfort of sometimes conversations kind of just of this nature. So with that being said, I'm going to ask just one more question today. After all is said and done, what was the one moment in life where you observed or felt the sensation of abuse, whether it was verbal abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, addiction? What was the form of abuse in your life that you were able to see or feel? And how did that leave an imprint in your life for who you are today? No one's reaching out to go first. So I'm going to pick one. George, go for it. What do you got to say about that one?
So to make sure I fully understand the question, and I paused because Morgan, I thought you were going to speak, and I apologize. So what took place in our life? Abusive, is that the word you use? Is that correct?
Yeah, let's just there are many forms of abuse. And I do believe that, especially at our age and by this time in our life, we've all seen or experienced personally a form of abuse, whether you've experienced it yourself or you've seen it through someone that you love. What was it, and how did it affect you? How did it influence you? And because of that, how do you behave as a result of that?
The best way I can answer this, and I'm not sure if it tucks up under the abuse category, but I would hear growing up, not often, but at times, my parents would have arguments, and at times it got loud. And it shaped me to where I do not like having an argument or even having a heated conversation, however you want to phrase it, around my daughter.
Yeah.
I don't like to have differences around her, and because of how it made me feel, because it makes a child do this, because that's my mom, that's my dad. They're not seeing eye to eye. So whose side am I gonna go on? And that's what happens with kids. And unfortunately, some parents, create an environment where you wanna choose. And naturally, I think a lot of daughters will side with their father. A lot of sons will side with their brother. And I'm sure you all have seen that. Not the case all times, but it happens. And, my dad, hero, looked up to him so much. But those moments I didn't like if he raised his voice at my mom. My mom, nurturing, loving lady, didn't like if she opposed my dad, So again, it was here. I don't think I ever was a child that went left or right. It just kept me here, but it was an issue. So now I don't like. I won't do it. And I probably can count on one hand the times that it's happened, and I'll catch myself quickly, maybe once or twice, and I just say, you know what, I don't like to argue. Period. It's not my thing. And not necessarily argument. Maybe it's a healthy discussion that allows emotions to rise. Right. A debate, if you will, kind of like you said, you and your ex-husband perhaps have had, but it's healthy. I don't like doing that around my daughter because it's not good. I remember how it made me feel. And she's 3, and I was probably 8, 9, 10, 11, maybe. Once I got in high school, probably didn't affect me as much, but that would be mine.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because most recently I was listening to a study that they were doing on newborn babies. And this study in which they were showing that even though a child is sleeping, and not just children, all people, when we're sleeping, we're still able to hear. Novelty concept, right? But when you're sleeping, you're still able to hear. So what they were doing was testing, putting earbuds. They were doing a brain scan on newborns, and they put, while they were sleeping, earphones in their ears while they were sleeping and watching their brain. And they were saying the same sentence in different emotions. One was sad, one was angry, one was excited, one was happy. and they were showing how traumatized the child was at just 2 weeks of life from hearing someone yell while they were sleeping. Right? Yeah. And how, and so that really goes into saying, like, imagine when we're not sleeping and children are overhearing us, argue. And it happens, that's part of families, right? I know that I did my fair share of arguing in my time and my kids back and forth, but it has a tremendous effect, as much, if not more sometimes than physical abuse, hearing that emotional strife and that verbal arguing is very affecting our brain hugely. So yeah, you're on to something with that awareness, and I send you prayers and in that conviction to create that peace, in your household, and to do that for the respect and the mercy of your daughter's years. It's not easy. Being a parent isn't easy, but it is possible. So good for you. Morgan, how about you?
When you first said it, I said, "Whew," because that's it's interesting because as I've grown older and we lost George. As I've grown older, and really looked back on my childhood with a different perspective. If you'd asked me in my 20s or even my 30s if I experienced abuse as a child, I'd say no way. I mean, I wasn't beaten. Nobody. I didn't come home and was scared to come home because somebody was going to come home and physically abuse me. I didn't have any of those fears whatsoever. But knowing what I know now, there was a ridiculous amount of yelling and screaming in my house all the time. I witnessed abuse between my parents. And interestingly enough, with the dynamic of having a mother and a stepfather, my mom was really the authoritarian in the house. My stepfather was bobbing and weaving and ducking and diving, trying not to be in trouble himself, I think, and not really being any kind of a disciplinary for me. And so, interestingly enough, anytime there was like a violent exchange between my parents, it was typically my mom initiating it. And go figure, my mom grew up with two brothers, right? So she wasn't afraid to get scrappy with a male. And I saw that quite a bit. As a matter of fact, as a teenager, hearing stuff going on and deciding I was going to go get involved and stop what was going on, 9 times out of 10, when I go back there, it was my stepdad getting his ass whipped by my mom. So it was interesting, and thinking about that as a 20 or 30-year-old, I'm like, oh, I wasn't being abused. Looking back now, knowing what I know, that was massive abuse, experiencing that as a kid. So it's interesting to, I think George was like, he was kind of searching for something in his life because, thinking of like along myself, like I wasn't abused, I wasn't beat, I wasn't hit. But there's a lot of abuse that goes on that's not physical. That's more of a auditory or
Psychological.
Yeah.
Psychological. And it really, the things that we are showing our children, and again, parenting is not an easy thing, so first and foremost, I commend you, for just sharing that as a child of a parent who, got to share with you firsthand what it's like to be her in and out of every day. And, the one thing I can say as a mom is, my 4 children had a front row seat to me and any conflict or anything that was going on in my life, not because I wanted them to, but because we lived together, so sometimes it's impossible to create a conflict-free environment. But when we are more, when we've seen more conflict than not, we learn then to be confrontational. We learn then to sometimes without even wanting to, how to, when push comes to shove, how to respond in an impulsive way. And that's usually those moments where like, oh God, I swore I wouldn't be my mom, or oh God, I swore I wouldn't turn out like my dad. And there it is, so it happens, right? It happens to the best of us. But that's also why I think having conversations like this and having a group of parents that you can move through, or a group of strong, men, or for me, women that you can relate to, makes all the difference, because then you have people that you can be like, what do you do when that happens? Or how are things going with you? But you've got to really make sure that they're people that you can speak easy with, that
Yeah.
you can say things honestly. And, for me, I really resonate. I think you had mentioned earlier what not to do. And I grew up with a lot of abuse in my household, a lot of yelling, um, you know, Italian, I'm from Chicago and was raised in an Italian Chicago environment. And what that looks like and feels like is everybody said things really loud, and you would say, stop yelling. And they'd go, I'm not yelling. What are you talking about? And that in itself was yelling, very passionate. And that was always told to me, it's because I love you, and it's because I love you I say this. It's because when I don't, that means I don't care. So I always thought that, being scolded, or being criticized, or being yelled at, or having that sort of controversy and the tension, I always thought that was love. And, it took me a long time. I mean, my children are young adults now, and I'm just starting to realize that that doesn't have to be, and I learned from listening to other people and how they were raised that it is possible to not yell at your child when they get an F in college, but rather to talk to them and find out what do you need? How you doing? But for me, when I was in college and got an F, I was yelled at, and I was disowned and I was kicked out. And so I tend to have that impulsive response because it was coming from a place of not knowing any better, and just immediately transferring what I knew. And today in my life, I work really hard to be aware, and to surround myself around a village of people that also are trying to be aware of the things that influence their lives and have infected their mindset, and to use those people in my village to remind me of my best, and to remind me that God is really the one that's in charge of all of this. And that
You,
when I put all of that understanding in God's hands, things change. Go ahead, Morgan. You were going to say something?
I was going to say, it's interesting. I remember George saying that, there was a time, a couple times when you were in Florida, you reached out and reached out to your mom specifically because you knew what your dad's response was going to be. I can honestly say, remember I told you that I learned some great things and I learned some things that I definitely didn't want to do. I cannot remember even one time reaching out to either one of my parents and asking them for advice as an adult because I was pretty damn sure they did it wrong. And so I said I seeked other adults, other men in my life, other women in my life to get those answers. I mean, I've told my mom stories of what my kids have done and what I've done to counteract it or to work through it, but I've never reached out to her for advice because, in my opinion, her advice would not have been the right way to go.
Well, raise your hand if you would like to be the parent that your children are able to call and reach out to for advice.
I definitely am. Definitely am.
Yeah. So this is a great way to just send our prayers up to the Lord and have Him bless us in planting some seeds. And in this moment, if we could just each plant some seeds of intention and ask God to just give us a gift. And what would that one gift you would ask God to just flood you with abundance on, so that you could influence your children and be that advocate and first call when they need something? What would that be for you, George? What would that be for you? And I'm going to ask that Morgan just close your eyes, and as George, plants his seeds and says a little prayer and asks for some grace and abundance from the Lord, that we just pray with him and feed that light.
Father, we thank you so much for this dialogue, for this meeting of these amazing people, God, and we just love you, and we humbly come before you, God, and I ask if you would provide me the heart that is receptive to my child's needs, God, whatever it may be. I want her to be able to come to me and speak to me about it, because I'm going to directly after that give it to you, God. As we lean on you, not by my own understanding, but by your way and following you. God, I just thank you for you being you. And I thank you again for this amazing conversation. And I ask for that heart, God, that my daughter can see that's going to be received well. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Thank you. And I would like to just build upon that and ask God to just hold his hands on us at this time, and to give us what we need for what we are called to do, to show up for ourselves and to receive all the ingredients of personal development and our authentic truth, and healing from our past wounds, so that we can cultivate new energy that gifts us with everything we want to please the Lord, and to give the Lord and all of his children what they need to grow and to just become. And I ask that God especially look after my friends George and Morgan, and that he bless their hands as fathers, and that they be kind to touch, and that their lips be blessed with words that flow, that are loving and caring, and that they receive the gift of listening, so that they can hear what is needed from their children and their amazing family, and the women that come forth in their life to support them. May they have their needs met always and feel supported in your light, so that they can create shifts in our world as fathers, as husbands, as beautiful men and souls on our planet, that make a difference for the better of mankind. I ask that we all take a deep breath into this space, receive that beautiful abundance of God's love and God's light. Morgan, would you like to plant any seeds today in this prayer?
Yes. First I would like to thank God for coming into my life, at times where I wasn't even necessarily seeking him directly, and showing up and, providing me the wisdom to accept things that I cannot change, and the guidance to change things that I can change. I'm not even sure if I got that exact saying right, but it really plays strong in my life right now, where he's playing a role with me when it comes to my mother, and what's going on in her life, my children, my relationship with my significant other, everything in my life. I feel God's hand and grace in, and I thank him for being there when truly sometimes I felt abandoned by my own parents, and being that rock that I needed, and that guidance, and that everlasting love that is so abundant in the Lord's Prayer. I just, please continue to give me the wisdom and the guidance necessary to be the father that I want to be, and the father that my children deserve to have. In Jesus' name, amen.
I ask in this moment that we each give our light to each other and just radiate love and light and support. Let us take a deep breath in. Slowly exhale, opening our eyes into this moment. And just feeling the beauty of three souls that can come together, never knowing before this moment, but rather to connect in the Word of God and in truth, and to speak about some things that may or not have been super easy, but to do so with love and to know that all great things can happen and be possible with love. Thank you so much for taking the time to create awareness and to be in truth with me. I truly appreciate both of you. And I hope that this effervescence, this energy spills into your life, creates the type of awareness, influence that is exactly what God wants you to have. Thank you so much for tuning in to Speak Easy with Love. I wish you both all the best. Peace, love, and happiness. Go ahead and stay on. I'm going to end our live. And we'll say goodbye to everyone that's out there. If you have any questions for any of us, please go ahead and feel free to leave them in the comments below. But otherwise, stay tuned. And please have a beautiful and blessed day. And all know that anything can be said when you speak easy with love.